Richard Sterling, a titan of industry, arrives at his father's inheritance meeting with his glamorous mistress, Sienna, on his arm, ready to claim his billion-dollar empire. But the family lawyer, a woman of ice, has a secret of her own. She's not just reading a will, she's detonating a bomb. In one sentence, Richard's world shatters, his mistress is humiliated, and a hidden wife no one knew existed is about to inherit everything. This is the story of how a lie unravels. Before we begin, take a moment and comment your city below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from around the world. Now, let's dive in. The rain against the 40th floor windows of Reed and Harrison was a relentless, percussive assault. Inside the boardroom, the air was tomb-silent, thick with the smell of old money, lemon-polished mahogany, and the cloying, inappropriate scent of Sienna Hayes's tuberose perfume. Richard "Rick" Sterling stared at the head of the table, his impatience a vibrating frequency in the room. He despised this. The performative grief, the legal jargon, the waiting. His father, Arthur Sterling, was dead. It was a transaction. Arthur was gone. Rick was next. It was the natural order. He adjusted the cuff of his Brioni suit, a $15,000 armor of charcoal wool. Beside him, Sienna shifted, her leather skirt creaking against the plush chair. Bringing her was a power move. A signal to the old guard, to his father's ghost, that Rick's era had begun. Sienna was his era, all glittering surfaces, curated ambition, and unapologetic self-interest. She was 26, an influencer with eyes the color of a shallow sea, and she looked spectacularly out of place. At the head of the table sat Ms. Evelyn Reed. She was a woman carved from granite, dressed in a severe navy suit that had likely been fashionable in 1995. She had been Arthur's personal attorney, his fixer, for 30 years. Her gray hair was pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to pull her eyes into a permanent, analytical squint. She looked at Sienna with the quiet, profound disdain a librarian reserves for someone eating barbecue ribs in the rare manuscripts section. "Mr. Sterling," Evelyn began, her voice a dry rustle of parchment. "We are gathered to execute the last will and testament of your father, Arthur Sterling. Ms. Hayes," she added, her gaze flicking to Sienna, "your presence is irregular, but Richard has insisted. Let the record show you are here as a guest of Mr. Sterling and not as a named beneficiary." Sienna flushed. "I'm here for emotional support," she snapped, her voice too high. Rick put a placating hand on her thigh. "It's fine, Evelyn. Just get on with it. I have a board meeting at 4. Evelyn Reed stared at him. It was a long, cold, assessing look. It was the look Arthur used to give him, the one that said, "You are, as ever, a profound disappointment." "As you wish," she said. She donned a pair of half-moon glasses and picked up the thick vellum document. "I, Arthur Sterling, being of sound mind and body." Rick tuned it out. He mentally scanned his portfolio. He'd shorted the yen, he needed to close the Singapore deal, and Sienna wanted to go to Gstaad for New Year's. He wondered if he could liquidate the Hamptons property before the capital gains tax kicked in. Sienna, meanwhile, was doing her own math. She was calculating the square footage of the penthouse she'd soon occupy, the clarity of the diamonds she would demand. She squeezed Rick's hand. "We're almost there, baby. And therefore, the bulk of my estate," Evelyn's voice cut through the fog, "comprising Sterling Holdings, the New York penthouse, the London flat, the Aspen estate, and all liquid assets held in trust, valued at an estimated $1.2 billion. Rick sat up. This was it. Sienna held her breath, her painted red nails digging into his palm. Evelyn Reed paused. She looked up, over the top of her glasses, directly at Rick. There was something almost imperceptible in her expression, a glint of satisfaction. It chilled him. "All said assets," Evelyn continued, her voice clear and sharp as a scalpel, "are to be placed into the Sterling Legacy Trust. This trust is to be managed and its assets dispersed in equal measure to my beloved son, Richard Sterling, and his lawfully wedded wife, Mrs. Lena Sterling." The name hung in the air, an alien sound. Rick's blood turned to ice. Sienna's head snapped toward him, her blonde hair whipping across her face. "What?" Rick's mouth was dry. "Evelyn, that's a mistake, a typo. My father was senile," he added, his voice rising in panic. "Clearly he was not," Evelyn said, her voice flat. "I spoke with him the day before his passing. His mind was, as ever, sharper than your own." "Who is Lena Sterling?" Sienna demanded, her voice a shrill crack. "Rick, who is that?" "It's no one," Rick stammered, pulling his hand away from hers. "It's a legal fiction, a mistake from years ago." "It is not a mistake, Mr. Sterling," Evelyn said. She reached into a separate folder and slid a document across the polished table. It spun and came to a perfect stop directly in front of him. It was a photocopy, a certificate of marriage from King County, Washington. The marriage between Richard Sterling and Lena Petrova, Evelyn read, was registered 3 years, 2 months, and 12 days ago. Your father, as part of his meticulous estate planning, procured this certified copy. As you never filed for dissolution or divorce, this marriage is, by the laws of the state of New York, valid and binding. Sienna stared at the paper. Her perfectly constructed face began to crumble. The mascara, the lip liner, the foundation. It was all just paint on a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Wife," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Wife? 3 years?" She stood up, knocking her chair over. You told me we were getting married. You told me I was the one. You have a wife?" "Sienna, sit down. Keep your voice down," Rick hissed, his face pale. This was not a complication. This was a catastrophe. "Don't you tell me to sit down!" she shrieked. "You lied to me! You've been lying to me this whole time!" Evelyn Reed simply watched, her hands folded. "Who is she?" Sienna screamed, her eyes wild. "Is she why you wouldn't let me move into the penthouse? Is she— Oh my God! Everyone knows about me. The tabloids, the blogs, and you have a wife? You made me look like a fool. You made me look like a cheap—" "That's enough, Sienna," Rick commanded, standing. "Enough? I'll tell you what's enough, you bastard!" She grabbed the heavy crystal water carafe from the table. "Miss Hayes, I would not do that," Evelyn said calmly. Sienna ignored her. With a guttural scream, she hurled the carafe. It missed Rick and shattered against the wall, spraying water and shards of crystal over a priceless Jackson Pollock painting. "You're a liar!" she sobbed, half in rage, half in the agony of her ambition turning to ash. "A pathetic, married liar!" She grabbed her purse, a white Birkin bag that Lena Sterling probably couldn't even identify. "You will be hearing from my lawyer, from everyone's lawyer!" She stormed out of the boardroom, slamming the door so hard the adjoining wall shuddered. Rick stood there, breathing heavily, his suit spattered with water. He was ruined. He slowly turned to Evelyn Reed, who was already blotting at the Pollock with a handkerchief. "Fix this, Evelyn," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Fix it? Mr. Sterling, I just did. Your father was very clear. The trust is ironclad. Not a single dollar, not one stock certificate, not even the keys to the Aspen House can be released until both you and Mrs. Lena Sterling sign the disbursement forms. Together." She paused, walking back to the table. "Your father's final instruction to me was, he made his bed. Now he must lie in it. With his wife." Rick felt the floor drop out from beneath him. He was trapped by a dead man and a woman he hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. "Where is she?" he whispered. Evelyn Reed picked up another piece of paper. It held a simple, handwritten address. "Your father was, as I said, meticulous. She lives on Bainbridge Island, Washington. She appears to be a librarian. Evelyn slid the paper toward him. I suggest you buy a plane ticket, Mr. Sterling, and I would strongly advise against flying private. As of this moment, your accounts are frozen. The echo of the slammed door vibrated in Rick's bones. The boardroom, which moments ago had felt like the stage for his coronation, now felt like a cage. The smell of tuberose had been replaced by the acrid stench of his own panic. "Frozen?" he repeated, the word catching in his throat. "What do you mean, frozen?" Evelyn Reed returned to her seat, a picture of infuriating calm. The terms of the will are explicit. Upon the reading, all personal and corporate accounts held solely by Richard Sterling are temporarily seized by the estate until the trust can be legally activated. The activation, as I've mentioned, requires the signatures of both named trustees. "That's insane! I run a global company!" Rick's voice cracked, a sound he hadn't made since puberty. "I have payroll. I have deals closing. You can't just stop everything." "Your father could," Evelyn replied, tapping the will. "And he did. He foresaw this reluctance on your part. He implemented this clause to ensure your immediate and undivided attention." Rick paced, pulling at his tie, the Brioni suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. He was the CEO, the Titan. Men twice his age quieted when he entered a room. And this old, dried-up woman and his dead father were treating him like a child whose allowance had been revoked. And Sienna. God, Sienna! His phone was already buzzing on the table, a furious, relentless vibration. He glanced at the screen. 14 missed calls from Sienna Hayes, 3 from Mitchell Vance, her shark of a lawyer, and 2 from Page 6. The conflagration had begun. The bomb hadn't just gone off in the room, it had vaporized his entire life. "She'll talk," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "She'll go to every tabloid, every blogger. She'll burn me to the ground." "Yes," Evelyn agreed, with no sympathy whatsoever. "She strikes me as the type." She steepled her fingers. "Which is why, I presume, you had her sign a non-disclosure agreement." Rick froze. The NDA, of course. He'd made every woman he'd dated exclusively sign one. It was standard operating procedure, a shield of legal-grade titanium. Page 4, Clause 8B, Public Scandal and Defamation. It includes a clawback provision on all gifts and compensation. "How comprehensive," Evelyn said, her tone dry. "Then I suggest you have your legal team. Oh, wait." She gave him that same thin smile. "They are part of the Sterling Holdings payroll, which is currently frozen. You may have to call them yourself. From your personal cell phone, which I imagine is on a plan paid for by—" Oh dear, Rick felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hatred. This wasn't just a will, it was a masterpiece of posthumous revenge. Arthur hadn't just tied his hands, he'd cut them off. "This wife, Lena," Rick said, forcing the name out. She knows about this." "Mrs. Sterling has not been contacted by this office," Evelyn said. "Your father was very specific that you, and you alone, should be the one to re-establish contact." Re-establish contact? Like she was a dormant client. Not a woman he had married in a fever dream of love and guilt, and then systematically erased from his life. "He knew," Rick said, the realization dawning. "My father, he knew about Lena all along." "Your father knew everything, Richard," Evelyn said softly, her tone shifting for the first time, losing its hard edge. "He knew you filed the marriage certificate in a rural county, thinking it would never be found. He knew you were sending her hush money, her words, not mine, which she was dutifully donating, every penny, to the Bainbridge Island Historical Society." Rick staggered back, feeling as though he'd been physically struck. Donating it? He'd been sending her $20,000 a month. "He knew about Miss Hayes, of course," Evelyn continued, her voice regaining its chill. "He was appalled, not by the infidelity. He was a practical man. He was appalled by the vulgarity, the public spectacle. He said you were building an empire with one hand and setting it on fire with the other, just for the thrill of watching something burn. The words hit their mark. It was exactly what Arthur had said to him after the disastrous Forbes interview, where Rick had posed with 2 models on the wing of his jet. "So this is it?" Rick said, his voice hollow. "A test? A cosmic joke from beyond the grave? He freezes my life, sicks my mistress on me, and forces me to go crawling to a librarian?" "She is, by all accounts, a very good librarian," Evelyn noted. "Head archivist, in fact. Your father was impressed. He admired her." That, somehow, was the worst blow of all. Arthur Sterling had admired no one. This trust," Rick said, grasping at straws. "What are the terms? Once we sign, we just split the money? I can buy her out. I'll give her $100 million, $200 million. She can have the London flat. Just name a price." Evelyn sighed, as if explaining a complex theory to a simple-minded child. "Richard, this is not a negotiation. It's a life sentence. The Sterling Legacy Trust is not a bank account. It's a foundation, a charitable foundation." Rick just stared at her. "Your father liquidated almost 70% of his personal holdings in his final months. That $1.2 billion is not for you to spend on Gstad. It is the endowment for the foundation. You and Lena are not the beneficiaries. You are the co-chairs. The trust provides you with a reasonable living stipend, your father's term, of $200,000 a year. Each. The rest is to be given away. $200,000. Rick spent that on watches. And the company?" he whispered, terrified of the answer. "Sterling Holdings? The company is the trust's primary asset. Its profits fund the trust. You are still CEO, yes, but you no longer answer to a board of shareholders. You answer to your co-chair, Mrs. Lena Sterling. All major financial decisions, acquisitions, liquidations, even your own salary, require unanimous approval from both of you." Rick finally, truly understood. He wasn't ruined. He was in hell. His father had not disinherited him. He had shackled him, chained him, legally and financially, to the one woman, the one memory he had spent 3 years trying to bury. He walked to the window. The rain had stopped, but the city looked gray, alien. His reflection stared back at him, a pale, terrified man in a very expensive suit. "I need a flight to Seattle," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual booming confidence. "I'll have my assistant book you one," Evelyn said. "I trust coach is acceptable?" Rick didn't answer. He was already imagining the small cottage, the scent of old books and sea air. He was thinking about Lena Petrova. And for the first time in his life, Richard Sterling had no idea what to do next. The flight to Seattle was a 7-hour humiliation. Rick Sterling, a man who hadn't flown commercial in a decade, was wedged into a middle seat in row 34 of an Alaska Airlines flight. His knees were jammed against the seat in front of him, and the man on his right, a software developer named Kevin, was enthusiastically detailing his new app for logging craft beer. Rick's phone was dead. He'd left his charger in the Bentley, which was parked at the private airfield in Teterboro. He had $400 in cash from his wallet and one credit card, a lowly American Express Platinum, not his Black Centurion, which had been declined when he tried to buy a bottle of water at Hudson News. Account frozen. He had landed at SeaTac, taken a cab to the ferry terminal, and now stood on the stern of the MV Tacoma as it cut through the cold, choppy waters of Puget Sound. The Seattle skyline, a monument to the very tech-driven ambition he championed, receded behind him. Ahead lay Bainbridge Island, a green, brooding shadow against the twilight sky. The wind was brutal. It whipped his unstyled hair across his face and cut through his thin Italian suit. He was freezing, exhausted, and profoundly, primordially angry. But beneath the anger, something else churned. a cold, dark stone of memory. Lena Petrova. He hadn't allowed himself to think her name in years. It was a file he had locked, encrypted, and buried. He'd met her 4 years ago. He was in Seattle to acquire a portfolio of historical buildings in Pioneer Square. He intended to gut them, leave the brick facades, and build luxury lofts. Lena was the head archivist at the City Historical Society, and she was the primary obstacle. She'd stood up at the city council meeting, a woman who looked utterly unremarkable. Brown hair in a simple bun, no makeup, a faded cardigan. And she had systematically, with surgical precision, dismantled his entire proposal. She used his own projections against him, cited zoning laws he hadn't known existed, and spoke with fiery, unshakable passion about the cultural vandalism of erasing a city's memory for another glass and steel box for people who don't even live here. He'd lost. The council had voted against him. He had been furious. He'd cornered her afterward, intending to intimidate her, to buy her, to find her price. "Everyone has a price, Miss Petrova. What's yours?" She had just looked at him, her eyes, a deep, clear gray, like the water in front of him now, filled not with fear, but with pity. "You must be so empty, Mr. Sterling." To think that. No one had ever spoken to him like that. He was intrigued. He'd pursued her. Not with flowers and cars, which she'd mocked, but with debate. He'd found her at the archive. He'd argued with her about history, art, philosophy. He'd found, to his astonishment, that she was smarter than him. She wasn't impressed by his money or his power. She was the only person he'd ever met who saw the architecture of his mind and wasn't afraid to point out the flaws. He'd fallen for her. It was a violent, obsessive, terrifying fall. It felt like authenticity. It felt real. His father, Arthur, was in the midst of pressuring him to merge with a European conglomerate. The deal required an image, a partner, a sterling woman. He'd shown Arthur a picture of Sienna Hayes, whom he'd met at a fundraiser. Arthur had approved. "She looks expensive," he'd grunted. "Good. Projecting wealth is half of wealth." In a fit of rebellion, a desperate act of claiming one thing for himself, Rick had flown back to Seattle. He'd found Lena at a small tavern with her friends. He'd pulled her outside into the rain. "Marry me," he'd said. "Don't be ridiculous, Rick. You're drunk." "I'm not. Marry me. Right now. I don't want to be that person. The one my father is turning me into. You make me real." She had seen the desperation, the truth in his eyes. And God help her. She loved him. She loved the broken, brilliant, angry man she saw hiding inside the corporate raider. They'd driven to the King County Courthouse, found a 24-hour clerk, and done it. His hands were shaking so hard he'd dropped the ring. They had 3 days. 3 perfect, rain-soaked days in a rented cottage, disconnected from the world. Then, his phone had buzzed. New York, the deal, his father. "I have to go," he'd told her. "It's the merger. It's complicated." "Take me with you," she'd pleaded. "I can't. Not yet. My father. He's old-fashioned. He wouldn't understand. You're too good for them. Let me handle him. Let me fix this. It's temporary." It was the last time he'd seen her. He'd sent the money. A monthly deposit. A quiet, digital reminder of their temporary arrangement. At first, he'd told himself it was to protect her, to keep her safe from his world. Then, it was to protect himself from her. She was the living, breathing evidence of his one catastrophic moment of weakness. His one act of authenticity. And Sienna had been so easy. She was a transaction. She wanted fame. He wanted a beautiful, unthreatening accessory. It worked. Until it didn't. The ferry shuddered, docking. He was here. He rented a drab Ford Focus, the last car available, and drove, using his dead phone's last ounce of battery for the GPS. The address Evelyn had given him wasn't a condo. It was a small pre-war cottage, set back from the road, almost hidden by an unruly, magnificent garden of wildflowers and towering Douglas firs. He parked. The air was silent, save for the wind in the trees and the distant foghorn of the ferry. He smelled wood smoke. He walked up the stone path. The cottage was painted a soft gray, with white trim. It was small, perfect, and utterly, terrifyingly her. It was a fortress of quiet. He saw her before she saw him. She was in the side garden, on her knees in the dirt. She was wearing overalls, boots caked in mud, and a thick wool sweater. Her hair, longer than he remembered, was in a messy braid. She was strong, her shoulders defined as she worked a trowel into the rocky soil. She was planting something. She looked happy. She looked whole. This was not the pale, heartbroken girl he had abandoned. This was a woman he didn't know at all. He must have made a sound, a snap of a twig. She froze. Slowly, Lena Petrova stood up, wiping her hands on her overalls. She turned. Her gray eyes met his. There was no shock, no gasp, no tears. She just looked at him, the man who had married her and vanished, the man who had broken her heart, the man who was now standing in her garden looking like a ghost in a $1,000 suit. "So," she said, her voice as calm and cold as the sound. "The dragon's finally dead." Rick was speechless. He'd rehearsed a dozen scenarios. Tears, screaming, a door slammed in his face. He'd even, in a fit of absurd optimism, pictured a tearful reunion. He had not prepared for this calm, surgical precision. My father, yes, he passed 2 days ago," Rick managed, his voice sounding hollow. Lena nodded, her gaze sweeping over him. He felt stripped bare. She wasn't just looking at him, she was reading him. She saw the expensive, rumpled suit, the exhaustion, the panic humming beneath his skin. "And you're here," she stated. It wasn't a question. "He must have left quite a mess. You don't seem surprised to see me." A small, bitter laugh escaped her. "Rick, I've been expecting you for 3 years. I just assumed you'd send a lawyer, not come yourself. Things must be worse than I thought." She picked up her trowel and stabbed it into the damp earth. "You'd better come inside. You're trespassing, and you're scaring the birds." She turned and walked toward the cottage, not bothering to see if he was following. He was, of course. He was a dog on a leash he hadn't known was there. He stepped inside. His penthouse in New York was a monument to minimalist, brutalist design. All glass, chrome, and hard edges in shades of black and white. It was a sterile, lifeless magazine cover. Lena's home was the opposite. It was overflowing with life. The walls were a warm, buttery yellow, lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves. Not curated, leather-bound sets, but a chaotic, beloved library of paperbacks, hardcovers, and old manuscripts. A fire blazed in a cast-iron stove. A half-finished weaving project, a riot of blues and golds, was stretched on a large loom by the window. The air smelled of wood smoke, old paper, and soup. A large, scruffy dog that looked part wolfhound lifted its head from a rug, gave Rick a low, unimpressed growl, and went back to sleep. "He's right. You do smell like fear," Lena said, walking into the small kitchen. "Tea? What? No, I need a scotch. I have chamomile or I have tap water. I'm not running a bar for your crises, Rick." She filled a kettle and set it on the stove. "Sit." He sat at a small, scarred wooden table. He felt huge, ungainly, a bull in her china shop. She sat opposite him, lacing her muddy fingers together. Her hands were strong, calloused, her nails short and clean. He remembered those hands. He remembered them tracing the lines of his face. The memory sent a jolt, sharp and unwanted, through him. "You knew," he said. "You said you knew he was dead." I read the Wall Street Journal. Arthur Sterling's death is global news. And you knew about the will. I knew Arthur. He wasn't the kind of man to go quietly. He was a chess player. He's been planning this move for a long time. Rick's head swam. You knew Arthur? You spoke to him? Oh, yes, Lena said, her voice casual. He found me. About 6 months after you left. He showed up right where you're sitting. He wanted to see the liability, the impulsive mistake his billion-dollar son had made. Rick felt sick. His father had been here, in this house. He came here to buy my silence just like you did, Lena continued, her voice hardening. He offered me $10 million to sign dissolution papers and disappear. And you? I told him to get the hell off my property. A ghost of a smile played on her lips. I think it was the first time anyone had said no to him in about 40 years. He was intrigued. He came back. He came back? Twice a month for 2 years. We'd have tea. He'd ask me about my work at the archive. He was fascinated by the history of the logging industry. He'd talk about his own life, about you. The kettle began to scream. Lena got up, her movements unhurried, and prepared 2 mugs of tea. She set one in front of him. Chamomile. He was, she said softly, the most miserable man I have ever met. He was a dragon sitting on a pile of gold, terrified someone would steal it, and heartbroken that no one wanted him. Rick stared into the tea. He was seeing a picture of his father he couldn't recognize. The man he knew was a tyrant, a voice on the phone demanding more. More profit, more growth, more. He respected you, Lena said, sitting back down. I think he loved you, in his own broken, terrible way. But he was terrified that he had raised a man who was just a shallow copy of himself. All ambition, no roots. All drive, no soul. And he told you this, Rick said, his voice laced with acid. He did, and I told him he was right to be, because that's what you had become. The words hit him, but they didn't have the sting he expected. They just felt true. So he set this trap, Rick said, finally getting to the point. This foundation, this joke. It's not a joke, Rick. It's his life's work. It's his apology. He's giving it all away, and he's trusting us to do it. He's trusting you, Rick corrected. I'm just the prisoner. I'm the collateral. He's shackled me to you to make sure I don't screw it up. Yes, she agreed, without blinking. That's exactly what he did. He looked at her. Really looked at her. The quiet librarian. The brown-haired girl he'd hidden. She was a fortress. She had been playing a long game with his father while he was playing dress-up with Sienna in Vanity Fair. So what now, Lena? He asked, his voice weary. My life is frozen. My company is paralyzed. That woman I was with, Sienna, is about to go public with every sordid detail of my life. I am, for all intents and purposes, ruined. And the only way out is you. He leaned forward, trying one last desperate gambit. The old Rick. I need you to sign. Name your price. I will find a way. We can dissolve the foundation. We can petition the court. We can take the money and split it, 50-50. You'd be one of the richest women in the world. You'd never have to plant your own, whatever those are. Again, Lena looked at him. The pity he'd seen 4 years ago was back. It was devastating. You're still doing it, she whispered. Even now, you're still trying to buy your way out of your own life. She stood up. I'm not signing anything, Rick, not like this. Lena, you don't understand what's at stake. I understand perfectly. You're here because your allowance was cut off. You're not here for me. You're not here because you regret what you did. You're not here because you're sorry. You're here because your father finally found a leash long enough to reach you. She walked to the door and opened it. The cold, damp air rushed in. I am not your escape hatch, Rick. I'm not your partner and I'm not your wife. Not anymore. Not in any way that matters. Lena, please, he said, standing. It was a word he never used. I'll sign, she said. He stopped. You will? I will, on one condition. Anything. You tell me the truth, not the half-truth, not the version you tell your lawyers. The truth. About her. About us. And about why you were more terrified of your father than you were of losing me." She looked at him, her gray eyes as unyielding as the granite of her garden. "You have to excavate, Rick. You have to dig it all up, and I have to watch you do it. And then, maybe, we can talk about the money." Rick stood at the threshold, the cold Bainbridge air warring with the wood smoke warmth from the cottage. He was trapped. The old Rick, the one who dominated boardrooms, who charmed models, who bulldozed city councils, was useless here. That man had no currency. He looked at Lena, this woman of chamomile tea and quiet strength. She wasn't asking for money or power. She was asking for something he'd never given anyone, least of all himself. Unvarnished honesty. He let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for 3 years. It came out ragged, a white plume in the twilight. "Okay." He stepped back inside, and she closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt unnervingly final. He sat back down at the table. The wolfhound, Barge, as he'd learned from its collar, lifted its head, huffed, and went back to sleep. Even the dog was judging him. "Her name," Rick began, his voice low, "is Sienna Hayes. I met her at a charity gala in New York. She was easy. She was what my father expected. She was ambitious. She knew what she wanted. It was a transaction. She wanted the lifestyle, the name. I wanted an accessory. Someone who looked good in photographs and wouldn't ask me difficult questions." He looked at his hands, unable to meet Lena's eyes. "Someone who wasn't you." Lena just listened, her expression unreadable. "When I left you here," he continued, the words tasting like ash, "I told myself it was temporary, to protect you from my father. But it was a lie. I was protecting myself. You saw me, Lena. You saw the hollow part. The part that was just a terrified kid trying to impress a man who could not be impressed. I couldn't be that person and be the CEO of Sterling Holdings. I couldn't be weak. And loving you felt like weakness. It felt like a liability. So you chose the lie," Lena said, her voice quiet. "I chose the armor. Sienna was armor. The penthouse was armor. The jet was armor. I built a fortress of things so no one could see there was nothing inside." He finally looked up. Her eyes were bright. She wasn't crying, but she was close. Not for him, for the man he'd failed to be. "And my father," Rick said, the last piece falling into place. "I was terrified of him. I've been terrified of him my whole life. He was this God, this angry Old Testament God. Everything I did, every deal, every acquisition, was to finally get him to say, 'Well done, son.' Just once." He laughed, a dry, broken sound. "And in the end, the only person he said 'well done' to was you. The one person I threw away." Silence descended. The fire crackled. Barge snored. Lena took a deep, shuddering breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "For that. That was the truth." "So now you know," Rick said, feeling emptied. "I'm a coward, I'm a fraud, and I'm broke. Can we sign the papers now?" "Not yet." Lena stood and walked to a heavy oak file cabinet in the corner, one that looked like it belonged in the archive. She pulled open a drawer and retrieved a thick, leather-bound folder. She placed it on the table between them. "What is that?" Rick asked. "It's Arthur's apology," she said. "He gave it to me about a month ago. He knew he was dying. He told me, 'When Rick comes, and he will come, this is the manual for your new life.'" Rick opened it. It wasn't legal documents. It was a plan. It was the Sterling Petrova Foundation. His father, the ruthless capitalist, had spent the last year of his life meticulously planning a massive charitable organization. There were files on library endowments, historical preservation grants, arts funding for inner-city schools, and affordable housing initiatives. It was beautiful. It was a legacy. He did all this? Rick murmured, flipping through pages of detailed proposals and financial projections. He did, Lena said. And he did it with me. After our tea, he'd stay and we'd work. He'd ask me, "Where does the money do the most good, Lena? Not the most public good, the most good." He was trying to buy back his soul. He knew he'd spent his life building an empire of things, as you call it. He wanted his death to build an empire of value. Rick saw a handwritten note from Arthur, scrawled on a blueprint for a community center. Lena, check the zoning. Rick will know the loophole for the air rights. He's smart, just lazy. Rick felt a sudden, sharp sting behind his eyes. He didn't trap you, Rick, Lena said softly, seeing his face. He saved you. He knew the money was killing you. The ambition was hollowing you out. He knew Sienna, or someone like her, would eventually destroy you. So he took away the poison. And he chained me to the antidote, Rick said, looking at her. He chained you to a partner, Lena corrected. He told me, Rick has the killer instinct, and you have the conscience. He knows how to build. You know why. He didn't want to disinherit you, Rick. He wanted to complete you. Rick Sterling, a man who had not cried since his dog died when he was 8, put his head in his hands and wept. He wept for his father, for the man he'd never known. He wept for Lena, for the love he'd betrayed. And he wept for himself, for the empty, wasted years. Lena didn't coddle him. She let him grieve. She just sat, a silent, steady presence. After a long time, he collected himself, wiping his face. He felt lighter. Emptied, yes, but not hollow. Okay, he said, his voice thick. Okay, what do we do? We? Lena asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, we. It's the Sterling Petrova Foundation, isn't it? You can't do this without me. I know the loopholes. I know how to build. A genuine smile touched Lena's lips for the first time. It was like the sun breaking through the Puget Sound fog. Yes, I suppose you do. Sienna, he said. She's still a problem. She'll be on Good Morning America by tomorrow. Yes, she will, Lena said. So you'd better call her. I can't. My phone is dead. My accounts... Lena slid her own phone across the table. I have a good data plan, and I assume you remember her lawyer's number. Rick looked at the phone, then at her. What do I tell them? You're not going to talk to her lawyer. You're going to talk to her. You're not going to threaten her with the NDA. You're going to tell her the truth. You're going to apologize. And then, you're going to offer her a donation. A donation? A one-time significant donation to the Sienna Hayes Foundation for Aspiring Influencers, or whatever she wants to call it, from our foundation. Call it a severance package. Make her a founder of something. Give her the one thing she actually wants. A headline, Rick said, a slow smile dawning. A legacy, not as a mistress, but as a philanthropist. Exactly. You turn the scandal into a press release. It's not a payoff, it's a partnership. Your father was right. You are smart. Rick picked up the phone. He felt a surge of energy he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the thrill of the kill. It was the thrill of the build. One more thing, Lena said as he started to dial. What? I'm coming back to New York with you. Rick's heart leaped. You are? I am, but we're not staying in your glass box of a penthouse. Arthur left me the keys to his private study. It's been sealed. He said we were to open it, together. Besides, she said, a glint of steel in her eye, if I'm going to be co-chair of a billion-dollar foundation, I'm going to need a better suit. Rick and Lena flew back to New York 2 days later. This time they flew first class, on an expense account Evelyn Reed had graciously expedited for the Sterling Petrova Foundation. The transformation was immediate. Rick, having confessed and been absolved, felt like a man emerging from a bunker. He was still Rick Sterling, but the manic, jagged energy was gone. He was focused. He spent the flight not barking at assistants, but quietly explaining to Lena the complex architecture of his father's holdings. Lena, for her part, was a revelation. She had shed her muddy overalls for a simple, elegant wool dress. She was absorbing the information with the speed of a high-end processor, asking questions that cut to the heart of the matter. So the shell corporation in the Caymans is a tax liability, not an asset? Why not dissolve it and move the capital into the education fund? Rick had never been more impressed, or more intimidated. They did not land at Teterboro. They landed at JFK, like normal people. A simple black sedan, not a Maybach, was waiting. "First stop," Lena said, as they crossed the bridge into Manhattan, "is Ms. Hayes. You handled her lawyer. Now we handle her." The meeting was at the plaza. Sienna had demanded it. She arrived flanked by her lawyer, Mitchell Vance, looking like a woman scorned and ready for war. She was draped in black, a grieving widow for a life she'd never had. Rick and Lena were already seated. "Sienna," Rick said, his voice calm. Sienna's eyes widened when she saw Lena. She had clearly expected a dowdy, mousy woman. Lena met her gaze, not with hostility, but with a quiet, unshakable confidence. "So, this is the wife," Sienna sneered, sitting. "The librarian. Come to claim your winnings?" "There are no winnings, Sienna," Lena said, her voice gentle. "Only a great deal of work. Richard and I are co-chairs of his father's new foundation. We're here to resolve things." "Resolve?" Mitchell Vance interjected. "My client has been subjected to public humiliation. She was in a committed, loving relationship only to be told—" "Mr. Vance," Rick cut in, "your client signed a non-disclosure agreement that includes a morality clause. By her energetic departure from the lawyer's office and her subsequent calls to page 6, she has voided it. We could quite easily sue to reclaim the $1.2 million in gifts I've given her this year alone." Vance's face tightened. Sienna went pale. "But we're not going to do that," Lena said, sliding a folder across the table. "That's a press release. We've scheduled a conference for tomorrow morning." Sienna opened it. Her eyes scanned the page. Sterling Foundation announces first major grant, the Sienna Hayes Initiative for Female Entrepreneurs. It's a $5 million seed grant, Lena explained, to establish a non-profit in your name helping young women build their own brands and businesses. You will be the founder, the chairwoman, and the public face. Your story of ambition and drive will be its inspiration. Sienna stared at the paper, speechless. "You're not a victim, Sienna," Lena said. "You're a businesswoman. We're offering you a chance to be one, a real one, not an accessory." "$5 million, Sienna whispered. "And a clean break," Rick said. "You'll be a philanthropist, a founder. That's a much better story than jilted mistress, isn't it?" Sienna looked at Lena, then at Rick. The rage in her eyes was replaced by a cold, sharp calculation. She'd been outplayed, and she'd been given a better prize. $10 million, Sienna said. $7, Rick countered, without blinking. And a seat on our advisory board for 1 year. Sienna smiled, a real, sharp businesswoman's smile. "Done." She stood, shook Lena's hand, and left with her lawyer. The viper's nest was cleared. "You're ruthless," Lena murmured as they left the hotel. "You're a fast learner," Rick replied. "You wanted 10. Their next stop was Sterling Tower. The building loomed, a monument to his father's ego. Evelyn Reed was waiting for them in the lobby. She looked at Lena, and her granite-like face softened into a genuine smile. "Mrs. Sterling, it is an honor to finally meet you. Your father-in-law spoke of you with profound respect." "The honor is all mine, Ms. Reed. You were his most trusted ally," Lena said, shaking her hand. "Please, call me Evelyn." Evelyn looked at Rick. "Richard, you look better." "I feel worse," Rick joked. "That's the conscience setting in," Evelyn replied. "You'll get used to it." She led them not to the executive offices, but to a heavy oak door in a quiet hallway. It had no nameplate. just a high-security lock. "Your father's private study," Evelyn said. "It's been sealed since his passing. His instructions were that you two were to open it together. The code is... well, he was a sentimentalist in his own way." Rick looked at the keypad. I don't know." Lena stepped forward. "I do." She punched in 8 digits. A date, 05/14/1945. "His mother's birthday," Lena whispered. The lock clicked open. The heavy oak door swung open, and the air that met them was still, cool, and smelled of leather, pipe tobacco, and old paper. This was not the office Arthur Sterling used for business. This was his sanctuary. It was nothing like Rick's glass and chrome penthouse. It was a room from another century. Dark wood paneling, walls lined with books. Not just business journals, but poetry. Keats, Shelley, Whitman. A threadbare Persian rug covered the floor. On one wall was a massive, detailed map of the 19th century American West. "My God," Rick whispered. He had never known this room existed. Lena walked to the center, her fingers grazing a heavy mahogany desk. It was perfectly, obsessively neat. The only things on its surface were a vintage globe, a green banker's lamp, and a single, thick, cream-colored envelope. It was addressed in Arthur's sharp, aggressive handwriting to Richard and Lena. Rick's hand was shaking as he picked it up. He broke the wax seal, the Sterling family crest, and pulled out a single, heavy sheet of stationery. "Read it," Lena said softly, standing beside him. Rick cleared his throat and began. "My dearest Lena and my son, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the first part of my plan has worked. You are together. Do not mistake this for sentiment. It is, like all my ventures, a strategic merger. I have merged my son's ambition with my daughter-in-law's soul. I trust the resulting entity will be more profitable than either of its parts. Lena, I am leaving you the most difficult task, to save my son from me. I taught him to conquer. I taught him that value was a number on a spreadsheet. I forgot to teach him that legacy is a garden, not a skyscraper. You must teach him how to plant something that grows. I fear I have raised a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. Do not let him fail. Richard, I am leaving you the one person I ever met who could not be bought. I am leaving you a conscience. It will be heavy, and it will be inconvenient. Do not, as is your instinct, try to discard it. I did not know how to love you, boy. I knew only how to build. I built an empire to protect you, and in doing so, I built a wall between us. I see now that I was a coward. I drove away your mother with my coldness, and I almost drove you away with my ambition. This foundation, it is my apology. It is the only way I know how to say, I'm sorry. The money is a curse. It is a weight. It has been my life's burden. I am now giving it to you, not as a prize, but as a responsibility. Do not waste it. Do not let it poison you as it poisoned me. Do not become the dragon. My only regret is that I will not be there to see what you build together, or who you become. Do well." Außer performs, Rick finished reading. He stood in the silence of his father's study, the letter trembling in his hand. He hadn't broken down on the plane, or in the lawyer's office, or even in Lena's cottage. But now, in this room, surrounded by the ghost of the man he never knew, he finally, truly broke. It was not a loud, dramatic grief. It was a quiet, profound shattering. The angry God of his childhood was gone, replaced by a lonely, regretful old man who had tried, in the only way he knew, to save his son. He felt Lena's hand on his back. A simple, solid, grounding touch. He turned, and without thinking, he pulled her into an embrace, burying his face in her hair, which smelled like the clean, cold air of the island. He wasn't holding an antidote. He wasn't holding a co-chair. He was holding Lena. "He loved you," she whispered, her arms circling him. "He was so proud of your mind, Rick. He just He just didn't know how to say it. He knew you, Rick murmured into her shoulder. He knew you were the only one who could fix this, who could fix me. We'll fix it together, she said, pulling back, her gray eyes clear and steady. We'll build his garden. They stood in that room for a long time, the past and future settling around them. They explored the study. They found Arthur's private journals, filled not with stock tips, but with observations on birds, with scraps of poetry, with heartbroken entries about Rick's mother. They found a framed, hidden photo behind a row of books. Rick, at age 10, proudly holding up a small, badly made wooden birdhouse. It was an excavation of a life. And in digging through Arthur's past, Rick and Lena were, without realizing it, laying the foundation for their own future. So, Rick said hours later, as the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the study. Co-chair, where do we begin? Lena looked at the detailed plans for the community center Arthur had been designing. We begin here, she said, tapping the blueprint. He was right. You know the loophole for the air rights. I want to break ground in a month. Rick looked at the plan. He looked at her. The old, familiar thrill of the build, the hunt, surged through him. But it was different now. It was clean. It was sharp. A month, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. I can get the permits in 2 weeks. 6 months later, the Sterling Petrova Foundation was not a headline. It was a force. The launch event was not a glittering gala at the Met. It was held on a windy Tuesday morning in the South Bronx, on a formerly derelict lot that was now a bustling construction site. The press was there, but so were community leaders, construction workers in hard hats, and a group of local high school students. A large banner hung behind the podium. The Arthur Sterling Community Center. Groundbreaking ceremony. Lena stood at the podium, and she was in her element. She wore no designer labels, just a simple, well-cut suit. She spoke with a passion that silenced the traffic and the jackhammers. She wasn't a librarian. She was a leader. Arthur Sterling spent his life building skyscrapers that touched the clouds, she said, her voice ringing out, full of conviction. But his final wish, his real legacy, was to build something that touched the ground, something that would grow roots. This center is not a gift, it is a partnership. It's a place for books, for art, for second chances. She turned and smiled at Rick, who stood just off to the side, watching her. My partner and I are honored to be the stewards of that wish. All eyes turned to Richard Sterling. The tabloids had been brutal at first. Billionaire's secret wife. Mistress paid millions. But the Sienna Hayes press conference, where she'd brilliantly, and with Rick's coaching, positioned herself as a new-age feminist philanthropist, had turned the tide. And the subsequent, relentless, quiet work of the foundation had done the rest. Rick stepped up to the podium. He was a different man. The restless, arrogant energy was gone. He was calm. He was centered. He looked happy. My father taught me how to read a balance sheet, Rick said, his voice steady. My wife taught me how to read a room, and my father's last lesson was that the most valuable things in life are the ones that can't be counted. He didn't speak for long. He spoke of new endowments for the city's archives, of the foundation's commitment to funding historical preservation, of value over profit. After, a reporter from the Times, not page 6, cornered him. Mr. Sterling, she said, you've effectively given up $1 billion personal inheritance. You're living on a $200,000 salary. You're working harder than you ever have. Any regrets? Rick looked over her shoulder. Lena was in the crowd, laughing with a group of the students, her face bright with purpose. She caught his eye and gave him that small, knowing smile. The one that saw all of him and wasn't afraid. He turned back to the reporter. Regrets? He said, a genuine smile touching his lips. I spent 38 years of my life being the richest, poorest man in New York. I had everything, and I had nothing. He looked at Lena again, a silent promise passing between them. Their relationship wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was something stronger. It was being rebuilt, brick by brick, on a foundation of honesty, shared purpose, and profound respect. It was the slow, steady growth of a garden. "I didn't give up anything," Rick Sterling said, turning back to the reporter. "I just stopped being poor." That's our story. The tale of the Sterling will is a journey from ambition to authenticity. It shows that sometimes you have to lose an empire to find your purpose, and that the strongest connections are the ones built on truth, not transactions. What did you think of Rick's transformation? And what about Lena's quiet strength? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama, resilience, and unexpected romance, please hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good twist, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life fiction novels every week. Thanks for watching.